In this video, we're going to add the autocomplete feature to our search form as well as the routes feature on the map. Okay, so first of all, we're going to need the places library of Google Maps. So we need to go back to our link in the script for Google Maps and add the places library. Okay, so to add that, we just need to say and using an ampersand and then libraries equal places. Okay, so if we save this and then go to the map. Now let's start with the autocomplete feature. We've already covered this in the Google Maps section, so I'm going to cover this quickly. So we're going to define a variable for each field. Okay, so let's start with the first field. So let's define a variable autocomplete 1. Okay, so we're gonna use a constructor here, the autocomplete constructor. So we're gonna use the keyword new. So the constructor is inside google.maps.places. Okay, and it's autocomplete. So it's going to take a couple of parameters. So it's going to take as a first parameter the input itself. Okay, so we're going to need to define the input in another variable. Let's call this variable input1 for now. Okay, and the second parameter is going to be the options of the constructor. So you're going to go back to the options variable as well. Okay, so let's define these variables right there. So let's say create autocomplete objects, for instance. Okay, so the first variable input1 is going to be the HTML element referring to that input. Okay, so we're going to get the element using its ID, and the ID of that is departure. Okay, so that's the first autocomplete. So if we save, we wouldn't try that for now because we don't have the options. So let's define the options first. So inside curly brackets, we'll just place the options we want. So we're going to have one option here is the types option. So we want to select only the cities. Okay, so the syntax for that is between brackets. Okay, we're going to use single quotes and then inside parentheses we're going to have cities. So if I save and refresh, let's give it a try. And we can see the autocomplete feature works. Okay, let's do the same thing for the destination field. So I'm just gonna duplicate that and call it input2, and instead of a departure, that's gonna be destination. Okay, and we're gonna have a second variable autocomplete2 input2, and we're gonna use the same options. So let's save and refresh the page, and here we go. It does work. All right, now let's build the routes feature. The routes feature is going to be called once we select one of the choices that we get using the autocomplete feature. Okay, so basically if we select one there and then we select another one right there, then we're going to see the route on the map. Okay, so to do this, we're going to calculate the route only when we select an autocomplete. Okay, so we're gonna look at autocomplete 1 and then autocomplete 2, and then we're gonna call a function which will calculate the route. The function is going to check that we've got two locations selected, okay, in both the departure and destination. Okay, so we're going to add a listener here using the add listener method of Google Maps event. Okay, so this method will take three parameters. So the first parameter is the autocomplete itself, which we stored inside the variable autocomplete1. Okay, and then the event is going to be, in our case, place changed. Okay, and that's what happens when we select a city using the autocomplete feature. And then the last parameter is going to be a function that we will execute. Let's call this function calculate route, like this. Okay, and we're going to do exactly the same thing for the autocomplete 2. Okay, all right, now let's define this function. Okay, so inside this function, we're going to use something we call the direction service. Okay, so we're going to need to create a direction service object. This object has got a useful method called route. This method can be we can send a request to this using this method. Okay, and then we're going to get a response with the route calculation, and then we can show the route on the map. So in order for us to use that route method, we're going to need to create an object using the directions service constructor. So I'm going to go right there and create this object. So we're going to create a directions service object. So why are we going to do that? To be able to use the route method. Okay. So let's store the objects inside a variable that we're going to call directions service. So we're going to use the keyword new, and then the constructor is maps directions service. Okay. All right, so before we use that method, we're going to need to build a request. So the request, as we covered earlier in the Google Maps section, let's store the request inside the variable request. So inside curly brackets, we're going to place all the options of the request. So we're going to have an origin. Okay. So the origin is going to be the value of the departure field. So let's call that value start, and let's define that variable start right here by getting the value, okay, of that field. So you can use jQuery and just select the elements using its ID departure, like that. And to get the value, we're going to use the val method, like that. Okay. Then we need the destination. So let's call that end. And let's define this variable end as the value of the field destination. Okay. And then we can add other options here, like the travel mode. We want to choose the driving mode. So to get that, we're going to need to use google.maps.directions travel mode.driving. Okay. And then we can select also the unit system if we like, and other bits, but we don't really need all those items. Okay. And now we're gonna check before we show the route on the map, we're going to check if both the departure and destination have got values. Okay, so to do that, simply we can just do something like if start and end. Okay, so this means that they both have values. Then we're going to show the routes. Okay, otherwise we will just reinitialize the map using the initialize function. Okay, so to show the route, again, we're going to use the directions service object and use the route method. So the route method is going to take a couple of parameters. So the first parameter is going to be our request, and the second parameter is the function that will be executed once we get an answer for our request. So this function is going to have a couple of parameters: the response that we will get from the Google Maps API and the status of the response. Okay, so first of all, we're going to check the status. So if the status is okay, and that can be translated by status equal google.maps.directions status.okay. So this means that the status is okay. So in that case, we're going to display the route on the map. Okay, now to display the route, we're going to need another object. Okay, so that object is going to be created using the directions renderer constructor. Okay, so we're going to do that when we initialize the map right there. So we're going to create a directions renderer object. Okay, so why do we do this? We need to use this object to display the route. Okay. I'm just going to define the variable right at the top. I'm going to call it directions display. And then we're going to set that variable right there to new google.maps directions renderer. So now we've got an object, and we can use the methods, okay, associated with that object. So before we use that object to draw the route on the map, we will need to bind this object to the map. Okay, so right after creating the map, we will bind the directions renderer, okay, to our map. So to do that, we're going to use the object itself, okay, and we're going to use a method called setMap. Again, all this has been already covered. Okay, if you're quite comfortable with that, you can go back to the Google Maps section and just copy paste the code from there straight away. Okay, so now we have the objects, or the objects that we have just binded to the map. Now we can go ahead and draw the route on the map. So to do that, we're gonna use a method of the object called setDirections, just like this. So this method will take one parameter, and that's going to be the response that we received for our request. Okay, it looks like I mistyped listener. That's better. All right, now let's save and try our code. Okay, so we can see the route on the map. So let's try something else. Okay, so it doesn't change because we can't have a route from New York to London. But if we try something like this, then it does work. All right. In the next video, we're going to add the sign up button and also update or customize the sign up form for our new project.